This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and our guest today is Dr. Marvin Joyner. Marvin is a former president of Central Carolina Community College, one who has longtime connections in both Central and Eastern North Carolina. Born in Nash County, worked in Selma, and was on the staff of Wilson Community College, made his way to Lee County, and as I said, was president of Central Carolina Community College for a good number of years. Marvin, welcome.
Thank you.
If we could, I'd like to start with where you started. If you could take us back to those early days in Nash County.
Yes, I grew up on a little tobacco and cotton small grain farm just west of Rocky Mount, almost taken in now by Rocky Mount. Went to rural Nash County schools, met a young lady that became my wife there in the third grade, and went through school with her. And then, of course, I graduated and worked for the Nash County ASC office for a year while waiting for the community college in Wilson to open. And then I went to Wilson Community College and graduated there, and then went down, as you indicated, to Selma, North Carolina to work for Space Defense Contractor.
Now, that was the time when NASA was just really getting started, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, President Kennedy was elected, and he announced the intent to beat the Russians to the moon. And so the company I went to work for made products that were used in that race to the moon.
So these products went into the Mercury capsules.
The Mercury was the first part, of course.
With Alan Shepard?
Yeah, with Alan Shepard and that first suborbital flight.
While you were working in Selma, was it at that point that you went back to school, or were you continuing in school?
Yeah, I didn't tell my wife, but I had already intended to start at North Carolina State at night. And, of course, working and going to North Carolina State was a very difficult thing to do. And we had married, and my wife was secretary to the president of the company. And one day, out of the blue, I got a phone call from Wilson asking me to come back and teach Wilson Community College that I graduated from. And that was a very difficult thing. I knew that it was attractive because they promised they would let me go to school in the summer, on the one hand. On the other hand, I really loved what I was doing, and my wife certainly loved what she was doing. And so it was a very hard decision to do that, but I agreed to go back and teach. And, of course, the president of the company said if he'd been there, he was in California when I gave my notice, he said he would never let his secretary go. He didn't say anything about keeping me. That's how I got into education.
You've identified a song for us that has some bearing on this time of your life, or at least looking back on this time of your life, the theme song from Chariots of Fire. Tell us about that.
Yeah, of course, I continued to go to college at night. I had got my bachelor's degree, master's degree, and doctor's degree. I had also worked my way up through the ranks from teaching for 7 years, from being a department head and then being vice president for instruction at the college, and had got my doctor's degree. And
that was around 1980, 1981?
Yeah, the period of time that makes Chariots of Fire pretty dear to me was probably 82. I believe Chariots of Fire was 81.
I think that's right. Yeah, the movie came out in 1981.
Yeah. And, of course, what happened was the president of the college at that time retired, and they did a search for a new president. And in the process of making the selection for the new president, some of the same issues that are dealt with in Chariots of Fire unfortunately became part of that decision-making process, particularly being a part of the right social class structure and having the right contacts and so forth.
That was a very significant theme in the movie.
Precisely. You know, one Jewish fellow and a Scotsman whose parents had been missionaries to China, trying to fit into a university that was very social class conscious and dealing with all of the prejudices and so forth that were associated with that, and struggling and identifying with their struggles with their religion and with the social structure, and how they managed to deal with that without violating their religious beliefs and moral principles was an inspiration to me to help me get through that period of time. And that movie will always, have a certain emotional engagement to me because of what it meant at that time. Yeah.
Well, and you were telling me before we came into the studio about how it, I suppose, sensitizes many of us to issues that ethnic minorities and others continue to deal with.
It does, because it was difficult enough for me, but as I indicated, I was not blind, been blessed with a good intellect, and just imagine a person with additional barriers, what their life must be like. And I'd so admire those people who have overcome those type things to go on and make a great deal of their life, because I think unless you've had a little bit of taste of that, you can't really appreciate and be sensitive to some of the things that these people face, and because of that tends to bring certain emotions and feelings as they're confronted with certain stimuli, statures, and those type issues.
Well, I suppose it's appropriate to go to the theme song itself of Chariots of Fire, the title track. If nothing else, in this context at least, it suggests something hopeful. It's a beautiful theme.
Absolutely. Just beautiful piece of music.
Let's hear it. The title track from Chariots of Fire by Vangelis. If you're just joining us, this is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and our guest today is Dr. Marvin Joyner. Marvin spent much of his career in education, both as a student and as a teacher and administrator. Marvin, you were president of Central Carolina Community College during what years?
From the fall of 1983 until the 1st of August of 2004.
Well, I know enough about the college to know that it didn't start out at the size that it is now, and you had something to do with it. Tell us something about its growth during that time period.
We immediately set to work and dedicated ourselves to providing services to Chatham and Harnett County equal to those that were being provided to Lee County. So we were able to establish satellite campuses in Lillington and Pittsburgh.
And as I understand it, there were initiatives that involved not only the education mission of the college with respect to its students, but also had a community focus. Tell us about that.
Well, one of the things, of course, that I'm particularly proud that we were able to do is to make a reality Lee County's dream for a civic center. The county had no way of having large assembly. They couldn't bring the North Carolina Symphony here. There was no place to do it. It was very much needed by the college because we had no way of assembling our people. We had to have our graduations outside and serve a number of other public needs. And so with the assistance of Representative Dennis Wicker, who became Lieutenant Governor, and Hal Seiler, and I think that was part of Grace Notes, perhaps,
was indeed.
At one time, and a gentleman by the name of Megs Golden, we conceived of a method of combining the needs of the college and the needs of the community into a facility that would serve both. And out of that came the Lee County Civic Center. And Representative Wicker was able to get some state money for that. And I, of course, spoke to all of the civic groups, everybody that would let me in the door, promoting the civic support. That involved some county tax monies going into it on the issue that it would be a very great public good to the county as well as the college to have such a facility. So I'm very, very pleased that it turned out that way.
And it has indeed become a venue for many, many events and services. And you mentioned the symphony. I know the North Carolina Symphony regularly makes the trek from Raleigh to perform at the Civic Center.
It does. If you've ever heard the symphony in that space, I think you would agree that it's a good format for the symphony.
I have heard it, and I agree. You've identified another song for us, Marvin, that has some connection with some of those earlier days that you were talking about. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Tell us about that.
Well, that, of course, I think came out about 1973, I believe. And I was very much in the throes of education, and the children were small. And so it just reminded me of how much of part of my success that my wife had been, because I got my bachelor's, master's, and doctor's degree after I got married and while working full time. And because of that, if it had not been for my wife being very patient, very supportive, very willing to give up a lot of things that young people tend to enjoy in order to allow me to pursue my career, I could not have possibly have accomplished the things that I did. So whenever I've heard that song, and it always reminds me of just how fortunate, and perhaps I'd like to think a little wise in my selection of a mate, because she has been such a wonderfully supportive person and part of everything I've accomplished.
What's your wife's name?
Carolyn.
And you've been married now 55 years?
55 years, that's right.
Well, the lyrics of that song talk about life's ups and downs, the pain and the glory, times that were hard, moments that I've spent hurting. If anyone should ever write my life story, for whatever reason there might be, you'll be there between each line of pain and glory, because you're the best thing that ever happened to me.
Absolutely.
We say amen to that.
Amen.
Well, let's hear the song. For Carolyn,
For
You're the
Carolyn.
Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, by Gladys Knight and the Pips. That was You're the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me by Gladys Knight and the Pips. Our guest today here on Grace Notes is Marvin Joyner. Marvin, born in Nash County, former president of Central Carolina Community College, husband of Carolyn, and father, as I understand it, of 2 children. Marvin?
That's right. John, a math teacher at Lee County High School, and a daughter, Amy, who is a minister in Jackson, Mississippi.
Marvin is also current chairman of the Coalition for Families in Lee County. Somehow has, over the years, found time to be involved in a number of volunteer organizations, a number of volunteer roles. Marvin, tell us about the Coalition for Families.
Came about because a nucleus of people in the county were very concerned about the high teenage pregnancy rate, the high infant mortality rate, the high school dropout rate for pregnant teenagers, and the premature babies that were being born because of lack of proper nutrition and so forth. So we just kind of morphed together. I think the Kiwanis Club of Lee County deserves credit for kind of being a catalyst of that. Jim Foster and Bob Hales, and of course Margaret Murkison and me and a few more people got together and were able, through Bob Hales' effort, to get a grant from the Research Triangle Institute to start addressing those issues. And we joined force with Dr. Dean Kessler, who had started a group to prevent teenage pregnancies because of his knowledge of the tragedy associated with lack of nutrition and things of that nature, and formed something called the Coalition to Improve Life in Lee County. And through the years, that has morphed into the current Coalition for Families.
And it's been headed for a long time, I guess since its beginning.
Carolyn Spivey is the only CEO that we've ever had, and I credit Carolyn with a great deal of success of what has happened with that organization. Her abilities and her stability contributed very much to that. I'm extremely proud of the fact that at a time when the population of the county has doubled during that period of time, that we've cut the unwanted teenage pregnancies drastically. Probably 75% the number that they were when we started, although we're dealing with a population that's twice as large. So we've had fantastic success, I think, with that, keeping people in school, keeping them healthy, having healthy babies, trying to keep them from having babies. That's very much part of what we do in cooperation with the Lee County schools, is prevention of pregnancies.
A very real meeting of needs. Speaking of which, I understand you've also been involved with Highway to Healing. Tell us about that.
Yes, I've been sensitive to cancer. I lost a sister to renal cancer very early in life. She was my oldest sister. And my father died with complications from prostate cancer. So I had a lot of sensitivity there. And as I had more time, I got very involved, became chairman of the board for Highway to Healing, And we have a sole purpose to provide free transportation to any resident of Lee County who has a cancer-related doctor's appointment or is in need of cancer-related outpatient treatment. And we service all of the major medical facilities surrounding Lee County in that transportation network.
What a terrific service.
It's very rewarding. And
as I understand it, you're also a volunteer driver yourself.
That's right. I am, and blood donor.
Blood donor as well.
And platelet donor, having given over 15 gallons of blood.
Oh, boy.
And a lot of platelets, yeah.
Marvin, if we could, I'd like to go back to where we started, and that is with your early biography. Growing up on a farm in Nash County, you had some connection or some awareness, as I understand it, of the mills there, the Rocky Mount Mills.
Very much so. My father was a farmer, and he worked in the mills, and my uncles, aunts, and so forth either worked for the Rocky Mount Mills, that was a spinning facility, or they worked in the weave shed, Sidney Blumenthal, which was a weave shed that used the spun fibers to weave cloth.
Some very difficult circumstances for those who work there.
People cannot understand today what those people dealt with no air conditioning, unbelievable noise levels, no protection by OSHA, misting the air with an oil-water mixture in order to make the yarn draw well would cause the cotton fibers that floated around all over the plant to stick to the people, and they would come out covered with lint, and they were derisively called lint heads by the upper class people in that area.
Makes it all the more special, I suppose, what Capital Broadcasting is doing to restore the mills to something new and different.
To be able to see the restoration of those little homes on Old Mill Hill there and what they've done with the facility itself, and knowing how many lives were invested in that facility. It's just really nice to see something good done with that.
Well, I've required you, I suppose, by my questions to take you back to some memories, and that ties into another song that you've identified, Memory from Cats.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
I love that song from the very first time that I heard it. It has a very beautiful music, I think was Andrew Lloyd Webber, but also the words, which were taken largely from a poem by T.S. Eliot, that are meaningful as well. And that was heightened when I was privileged, along with some friends, to hear Laurie Beachman, who I guess was terminally ill, but still able to sing at that time, sing that song at the Raleigh Memorial Auditorium, and was able to go and hear her sing that song at a time when I know it must have had a particular meaning to her because of some of the lyrics of the song.
Can you tell us something about the lyrics for those of our listeners who might not be that familiar with it?
Well, it's, I think, a combination of sadness that all of us can identify with some extent as we age. When she sings about being all alone in the moonlight, I can dream of old days. I was beautiful then. Of course, we know that how bedraggled Griselda was in her appearance at the time she was singing the song in the play. And I remember the time I knew what happiness was and let memory live again. And of course, all of us in my age group in particular, as we begin to age, see people start losing their health. We've lost many of our contemporaries, a lot of the things that brought us joy, a lot of the beauty of life is sometimes stolen away. And so we can identify with the words that she's singing, but at the same time, there's a dawning or a daylight. And that makes us remember, too, those of us who are people of faith, that this life is not the end. When she sings, I must wait for the sunrise, I must think of a new life, and I mustn't give in. When the dawn comes, tonight will be a memory too.
Yeah, what a great line.
Beautiful. A beautiful song.
Well, and it says something, too, I think, about living in the moment, regardless of our age.
Regardless of our age, yeah. Perspective, of course, is so much. And reflecting upon what we have and what we've not lost rather than what we have lost, I think helps us to get through, as we age in life. Yeah.
Well, Marvin, it's been a privilege to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. Your work and volunteerism and all that you've contributed to the places that you've lived and worked have benefited so many people. And on behalf of them, to whatever extent I can, we thank you. I thank you.
Well, you're certainly welcome. It's obviously been a labor of love on my part. It's been nice to do with your life something that you really believe has been a benefit to others. And that's, I think, is important.
Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Let's hear the song. We're going to hear the version by Elaine Page, Memory, from the musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber, Cats. You've been listening to Grace Notes, a special program here on Life 103.1 featuring people who may be relatively unknown, but who meet life's challenges in ways that brighten the lives of those around them. Our producer is Christina Dolan. I'm Alan Button, and we invite you to join all of us here at the station again next Friday at 5:30 for Grace Notes on Life 103.1.